Hello, everybody, and welcome back to your very vague Milan channel / podcast. Martino Puccio, Matt Santangelo, and a recurring guest on multiple shows that we've done over the years, Tom Scholes, Spurs fan, unfortunately, but Ligue 1 aficionado, just incredible wealth of knowledge in that league. And obviously, these days for Milan, certainly the past few years, have linked us to tons of talents. Our best players are from there, or just even played in the French footballing system, whether you're Teo Hernandez or Benacer as well. But Tom, thank you so much for hopping on to do this with us. It's always a pleasure, and especially when we get a fellow baseball fan on as well. But how are you, and what did you think of the Ligue 1 season?
You know what? Firstly, thank you for having me on. Secondly, I always enjoy coming on speaking with you guys. Thirdly, with the Ligue 1 season, I thought outside of the whole, the new Hollywood FC that is Paris Saint-Germain, it was actually a really interesting season with a lot of teams that kind of like surprised people more than I think they expected them to, which is the whole purpose of the surprise. But you get my point. It's like Lons, who we're going to speak about shortly, I think everybody kind of knew they were the perennial dark horses of the season. A little bit like when Croatia go into major tournaments. Everyone, at some point, they stop being dark horses because everybody knows they're going to be dark horses. And then they do something that makes you go, oh, but I didn't expect that. That's what Lons have done. Everyone kind of would have been like, okay, they could get Europa League. They could get European football. That wouldn't surprise anybody. And then you see them like post World Cup, just towards the business end of the season, they're still in a title race as much as that league can have. But teams like that or Rams with meme and internet legend Will Still at the helm, he surprised a lot of people with all the facts that everybody knows off by heart about him. But also like Florian Balogun, who was not a journeyman isn't fair because you can't really be a journeyman at the age he is, but he was like bounding around at loads of different clubs on loan and he failed to find a home. He failed to really break out, and everyone went, no, trust me, he's good, he's a good player. And then, no one really saw it until this season when he's banging in goals. He's one of the top goal scorers in Europe when you take away Erling Haaland. His stats are actually quite impressive. But I think the season itself was entertaining. It was interesting. I think, once again, it showcased itself as the place to get new young talent for top clubs around Europe.
Yeah. Real quick too, before we start getting into the main reason why we got you on here, of course, is to talk about some of the transfer targets linked to Milan in this upcoming summer window. PSG, I think it's interesting to look at their squad build and the futures of basically everyone up front. Obviously, with Messi, we all know that there's the Saudi offers, there's potential return to Barcelona, there's the opportunity potentially in Inter Miami, and then you look at Neymar, and then you look at Mbappe. I mean, ultimately, when you discussed the sort of landscape of what the French top division looked like this year, and you kind of see where it's projecting over the next couple of seasons, do you think there's a real possibility that PSG take a major step back? I know they got the money. I know they have that engine behind them. But when you have a potential reality where they're losing two or three of their star men up front, what does PSG look like going forward? I mean, I know they spend money. They get guys like Carlos Soler. They get all these players. They don't really lose players to like other teams coming in because they rather just keep the money and, they rather let a guy like leave for free than sell him. But what do you see happening with this PSG project going forward?
Weirdly, and if you'd have said this to me 5 years ago, that a team losing Messi and Neymar possibly in the same summer would be a benefit to them. One, no one's believing you. Two, you're completely insane. But such is the mad, mad world of Paris Saint-Germain at the moment that is a possibility. But also, I don't think you'll find many people that follow Ligue or Paris Saint-Germain fans that will disagree necessarily with it. And again, another weird thing about it is, if you were to lose one of them, if someone said to you, you have to lose Messi or Neymar, which one are you going with? I think most people probably say get rid of Messi. And I say get rid, that's probably harsher than it should be. It's because I think the fans have got to a point now where, no one is doubting that, the only doubt that anybody has over Messi is whether he is the greatest player that's ever lived. That's a pretty damn good doubt to have. He's one or two, and both are quite good. Neymar, regardless of what certain pundits on my side of the world have to say about him. He is an amazing player, one of the best of this generation, arguably one of the best of all time. However, they don't always show that they care for Paris Saint-Germain. Maybe that's because they don't care for Paris Saint-Germain. Maybe it's because they're picking up such a paycheck that they've got that protection behind them. They're Lionel Messi, they're Neymar. No one's going to criticise us, but you saw the fan reaction when they're going to Neymar's houses. When the house, a bit Freudian, I'm sure he does have multiple houses, but on this occasion, just the one. They're going to the club offices because they're fed up. They're fed up of superstar names that don't really care for the club in the same way that they do. And they just want someone that, and I think this is one of the things that someone like Fabian Ruiz has, I think, shone more than many expected, is because he's playing like he cares. He's playing like he wants to be at that club. He's not playing like he's got his nose down at the club. And an example that always comes to mind, and I'm going to bring my beloved Tottenham Hotspur into this, is Antonio Conte is an undoubtedly wonderful manager. You guys will know better than anybody else just how good that guy can be in Serie A. Not necessarily in Europe, but nevertheless. He is an unbelievable manager in the right situation. When he turned up at Tottenham Hotspur, and this is why the fans turned on him a little bit, is there's no doubt in his ability. There's no doubt in his knowledge. There's no doubt in his passion. But he did look down at the club as if he was better than that, and he was doing them a favour. I think that's what some of these Paris Saint-Germain players, certainly the vibe they're giving off anyway, and that's certainly the vibe the fans are picking up. So I think what they're going to try and do is just to buy players who want to be there. Buy players who may not be superstars. They may not be on the front pages of advertisements on world tours. You're not going to see kids with Neymar, who have Neymar and Messi shirts at the moment, buying Skriniar tops, for example. But what they offer is stability. They are sturdy players. They are people that do their job very well. So whilst they are losing the star power hasn't always benefited them in the past, and it's been one of the criticisms. So in a way, whilst it looks like they're taking a step back, and from the outsider's point of view, I completely understand that, but from within it, they look, if anything, they're going to be moving forward when one, if not both of them, do leave.
I think both leave. Because Messi's contract, obviously, but Neymar, it's the end of the road. He isn't the face there like he would have expected to have been. Obviously, they couldn't turn down the Mbappe possibility at the time when he was available. And just continuing down the path of the better talents are actually in your backyard. You don't have to go abroad and drop obscene amount of money. This is why we're here, in which we could just quickly go to this. Openda. I mean, this is really the situation in which Milan this summer, we all know the situation. Speaking of French, their best scorer is a Frenchman. 4 of his 12 or 13 goals in Serie A this season, as Sant'Angelo knows, came against a relegation side in Sampdoria. And not to mention the other set pieces, which were just penalties to take. So all in all, Giroud at times is a great player to have, but he's 36. He was playing in the World Cup this season as well. He's getting over 3,000 minutes. Your 41-year-old legendary striker, another former PSG player, and Zlatan, not good enough. And then Origi was just a complete disaster. Openda was absolutely phenomenal this season. Can you speak to his talent, how much he would cost, and how well he would fit into this side? Because if there's anything Milan need from a physical profile, it might be him. So if you want to speak to all that.
What I like about him the most is he is a really, really good modern striker. And what I mean is he's, you go back years and years, and I think, ironically enough, a player like Giroud was 20, 25 years ago would have been perfect. He would have been one of the best strikers in the world because, this might sound like a slight and it isn't intended to be one, but he is a very good goal scorer. And that's it. Maybe a target man as well. He can flick a ball on from a set piece, or he's a good outlet. But to be a top team now, you can't really have that. You look at all the top teams across Europe at the moment, and you go, Man City, obviously Erling Haaland. You go Arsenal. There's fluidity in that front line. Bayern Munich's one of the problems they have is there isn't enough fluidity in that front line, and they don't have that. They have the pieces, but it doesn't fit together. Inter Milan, look, they're Champions League finalists, so by law, I have to call them a top team. Forgive me for that one. Lautaro Martinez, Romelu Lukaku, who gets a bad rap over here, but I think it's because he fits into that category of we don't really know what he is, but every time he's been in Italy, he's been on fire. Edin Dzeko is another one, is somewhat similar to Giroud, but he's got a little bit more about his game, in my opinion. Yeah. What Openda offers is that pace, that fluidity, but also the ruthlessness to be a 20-goal-a-season striker. And he adapted incredibly well to Lens from the move he made from, I think it was Belgium he came from. And he was pivotal to the way that this team played. They lost Kalimuendo last season. He was only on loan for Paris Saint-Germain. I expected them to keep him, but for financial fair play, they sold him for, I think it was 20 million euros to Rennes. It's one of them things in hindsight, it is what it is. But they needed to replace a striker. He performed quite well. But I think what they've realised is Openda has taken them from a certain level, which, for argument's sake, we'll say Conference League, to now they're a Champions League team. I will be stunned if he stays there. I'd love it if he stays there because I think they've got a really good team with some really good players. But the reality is, football is, unless you're one of the powerhouses, you need to sell these players to survive and the cycle continues. If I'm Milan, I'm looking at this and thinking, if you put a bid in off the top of the dome, non-Premier League tax, I'm going to say...
Incredible American reference by Tom. It's not British.
I said it once and someone looked and just went, "What's the dome?" I was like, that's the dome.
Continue. So the price again, sorry to interrupt, the price in your range and projection, it's going to be over 30 million euro.
I say between 30 million to 35 million euro, and that's not including Premier League tax, which could be a thing. We know it's a thing, so it's going to be a thing. Sure. But if I'm Milan, I'm putting that bid on the table. Even if it's a bit of an overpay, he's worth an overpay.
Man,
I think, I think, look, unfortunately, in this striker climate, anyone that's worth having, it's very rarely that you're going to be able to just put anything under. I mean, even last year when Milan were trying to get CDK in there from Club Brugge, Club Brugge paid and stood firm on their asking price because they knew they had Leeds, they knew they had some Premier League interest, they knew he had Champions League experience, and they were like 32, and then it was 32 in bonuses, or take it or leave it. And at that point, for this player in this specific position, which goal production and qualities at a premium, it's fair. I think the days of Milan trying to lowball and get to a 20 to 22 million price tag is ludicrous, because we all know that a barely afloat team in the Premier League will put up 35 easy, and they'll get their guy, no matter how good or bad of a fit he might be there. So I think at the end of the day, Milan have to really size up Openda and the striker market and the rest of their squad, because they do have Giroud. Yes, he's going to be there for another year. Ibrahimovic is gone. You're removing his wages from the books. But then everyone else is, you have Divock Origi, who could potentially be sold. You also have Marco Vlasic, who's coming back from loan, potentially. He might get loaned out. So you have him and Lorenzo Colombo. Like, you don't have much surety up top. So I think this is the time, this is the summer, given how dire it is for Milan to get goal production up front, and given the fact that they were nearly on the outside of top four, they need to really do some reflecting on the market. And if they see Openda as the guy, I think you're right. Like, 35 is a pretty fair asking price for a player that just did what he did. And given that Milan has this sort of lens for talent in France, I think they have to make a really sizable investment this summer for this position.
And I just want to say real quick too, with the profile and expectations for what the club wants. So if you want to consistently get top four and compete for trophies further, Maldini was even saying it, you get to a Champions League semifinal, it's clearly lacking talent in multiple positions. Eventually you have to pay. And considering some of the other options out there, like just to throw out names, is Benjamin Seko. First of all, that's going to go at least 60 you're starting at. So that's already double the price. Even if we want to stick in Ligue with Jonathan David. Jonathan David is starting price at least 40 million, especially considering the market he's going to be coming from, which is North American. So more eyeballs there. that's an even bigger deal than even with Balogun as well. Like, what is Arsenal going to do? What are they going to demand? Because they know they're pretty close to where they want to get to. They're going to demand money for that, or unless they do keep them, who knows what happens.
Too, I mean, even someone like Marcus Thuram, like might be available on a free, but you're going to face competition, and you're going to have Premier League clubs looking in there to essentially overpay above and beyond. So yeah, I mean, Milan have to figure out what they want to do. You know, if it's a free transfer, okay, well, you're going to have to pay up and compete on wages. If it's this is the guy that they think can lead the attack and provide some more fluidity, as Tom alluded to, some of the other top clubs, you know, what they can offer, you know, and lay out that proper support channel to play off. I think that Openda could be, you know, a really good investment for us.
Yeah, and more investments as to where Milan need to look towards is the midfield. So the midfield situation, in my opinion, it's very dire compared to what some people might think. First of all, Benacer is going to be out to at least November, at the very least, with that surgery that he picked up. I think it was in the match against Inter in the Champions League. So you lose him. It was already rough without replacing Frank Kessie this past season. So to think that going into this season right now, into the double pivot in which they were considering playing, there's two options that are heavy as of right now. One of which is from the Premier League and Ruben Loftus-Cheek. And I'll pull this up real quick from our good friends at Sempre Milan with Fofana here. Take that away. Yeah, so listen, we are looking at a potential 25 million euro release clause if Milan were willing to do so. Listen, he is an instant plug and play player from what I've seen, and I think he's capable of playing at this level. It's not the same type of profile that Milan have been going after, which is higher upside, maybe not necessarily ready within the first season, like we've seen with Leao, Tonali, and a few other players. Fofana, Tom, would you agree with that? Would you think that he is someone that could come in and play not seamlessly, but you don't have to worry about this learning curve like some of these other younger players would have if they're coming to a new league, especially like Serie A? So what kind of player would he be? Would he fit into a 4-2-3-1? We obviously see the price tag already, so that's not really much to discuss. But how do you think he would adapt to Serie A and especially this formation?
First of all, the price tag is something to discuss because France football doesn't have release clauses. It's banned.
Okay, so then there you go. What are the Italian reports? So right there. Okay, so there's no. Okay, so we eliminate the 25 million.
I would say 40 million for him because he's an unbelievable player. He is exactly what a team needs when you look at a modern midfielder that isn't creative. He's the guy. I remember when I spoke to you guys before, I was raving about this guy. I love him as a player.
Yes.
I love him as a character, and nothing has changed over the course of the past 12 months in this season to affect my opinion on the man. I was saying at the time, again, reversing this truck up a little bit to go back to what we were saying about Paris Saint-Germain, where the talent is in your own back garden. You know, they don't need to go searching around La Liga for bang average midfielders when you've got players like him there. That, at a club that is willing to sell, and he ain't turning them down. So I think on one hand you've got that competition that I think if Milan had gone for him last year, they probably would have got him and he would have been fantastic. But they didn't, and it is what it is. I personally think that ship might have sailed a little bit just because, and again, I'm sorry about this. It's not my fault, but the Premier League just has loads of money.
No, yeah.
And what the Premier League does is they wait for other clubs to realise that players are good and just spend more than them rather than scout them. They go, "Oh, you have a track record of buying good players. I'm going to buy him, so you can't have him." Yeah. That's what's going to happen.
What's the meme with Mourinho and Arsene Wenger when they're in the studio and he's like looking over at his notes on the paper? It's just a classic.
It's exactly it. It's like, let me take a look at your homework, but don't copy it. Just spend more money on it.
Change your name at the top, yeah.
Just change the date. And what he offers is dynamism. He offers, brilliant on the ball, and he's really, really kind of like I don't know what the word would be to describe it, but he can galvanise your club and your fans in a game, because he will make a 50-50 tackle, but also make a driving run that does that thing where it makes everybody just stand up and go, right, we're not out of this. And you know how this silly little game works. You can be battered and battered and battered for 85 minutes, but if you have like a little 5-minute spell at home, your fans can be like, hang on a minute, we're not out of this. We can, put fist pumps onto the chest and all that kind of nonsense. That he can galvanize you, and he can be the leader of your team. But he also is the kind of guy that if he walked in and you made him captain, no one would bat an eyelid. He has that kind of character.
Yeah.
He's a brilliant player. I saw reports linking him to Paris Saint-Germain, but I just think that's like the standard. You know, I'm sure it happens in Italy that every player and their dog have been offered to Juventus at some point in the past decade. But, you know, the biggest club always gets, or one of the biggest clubs rather, always gets linked with everyone.
Good word.
I had to remember where I was then. But no, he's the kind of player that if you were to sign him, he's fantastic. I really, really, really like him. I think last year might have been the time to get him because, you know, there was that element of is what Lons are doing not a fluke? I think that's a bit unfair, but is it sustainable? I'm sure the same thing will happen with other clubs across the continent, but I think what Lons have done is kind of establish themselves as a consistently good team. And this team in particular is a consistently good team, and he's the driving force, and he's the guy, for lack of a better phrase, that has been the leader of it. He's been the anchor of this team, and he's always been part of it. He's never shirked any responsibility. And if you're Milan and they say, right, we want you to 50 million, let's say, right? They're not paying it, but if I was Milan, I'd go, I don't rule it out. Like, let's see if you can find that 50 million from somewhere.
I know what you're saying. Yeah.
I think the one thing too about Fofana that I want to kind of go back on, Tom, I think you make a great point, is sort of the brilliance, the intelligence, the game management that Fofana can have, right? And you talked about, you know, the players that, you know, for his role specifically, like sometimes they do get overlooked when you have the ball playing, you know, registas and the guys that make the flashy passes or that make the final ball into space, and those guys tend to get a lot more of the eyeballs and praise. But I think a guy like Fofana, talking about his character and speaking a little bit to that, I think is exactly what Milan could use in this midfield. Yes, Tonali has a couple years under his belt. He has now multiple Champions League campaigns under his belt. He has a title under his belt. Same thing with Benacer. So you have some guys that, while they're young, they're starting to get a little bit more of that seasoning behind them and that experience that you need to compete at the highest levels in the Champions League and to be sort of that mainstay when it comes to, you know, being a dominant league team. But I think Fofana would slide right into this team, and that character and that ability to be a man for the occasion, I think is something that Milan are lacking, not just maybe in the midfield, but I think top to bottom. I don't think you could ever have enough of those guys where, you know, you can put them into a Champions League game away, and when it's maybe Tonali or Benacer or injured or not quite in it, Fofana could run that midfield. He can be like a man of the match for you and win a game for you from that midfield position. And that experience alone and that quality alone, I think makes him such a sound player and a player that I'd love to have. I mean, just completely throwing away the fact that I think we're priced out of him at this point, given our budget, which has been reported to be 51 weeks, 70 million the other week, 100 with sales and wages being cut. But I think regardless, if we're speaking purely on the quality of the player, that veteran presence, again, the character element, I think those are so huge. And those are things that if Milan were going to sort of veer off their normal plan of going for like young upside players that they can get on the lower end, I think Fofana would be the perfect player for us, and a player that we missed this year when we lost Frank Kessie, because I think we lacked a little bit more of that bite in the midfield.
Yeah, I think that was a big one too. Again, just if you aren't too familiar with the situation, Milan didn't necessarily invest this past summer because of the ownership transfer. This is just in general to anyone tuning into the video. So they really just got their prize money from winning the title. They made it into the Champions League and said, here's 50 million, and that's all you got. And they're going to continue to be priced out. They still have this UEFA agreement that's going to be running through to 2027 almost. Isaac Muller of sempermilan.com, I tweeted it out yesterday. He kind of broke down everything. So real quick, guys, I ask you both, and we can round out the video, and then we can watch this Europa League final. Here's the question. Out of the likely, I think we already answered this already, but out of the two, who is more likely to join Milan? And if we know that answer, why would it be one of the other players? And who would you pick if you had only one to add to this Milan side? Would you rather take Openda or would it be Fofana? Matt, I'll let you go first, and then Tom.
I think Openda. I just think that we've lacked a presence, real difference maker, and a goal scorer up front for a while. We've tried Krzysztof Piątek. We've tried several different names, Andre Silva, sizable amounts invested in those players, 35 million plus each on each of them. And they obviously were colossal failures for us. Now, I'm not going to say that I watch more French football than Tom, and I can speak to Openda's quality. I'm only going based off, guys like Tom and people who are really well-versed and knowledgeable in the league and on the player, and kind of putting my trust in those sorts of things that this is the right guy for us. But I think given the sort of build of our team, I think we would be able to find a decent defensive midfielder or someone that can do a decent job for us to be our third midfielder or fourth midfielder. Whereas I think it's really difficult for us to kind of be going into another summer and trying to rationalize, we're going to take another shortcut again on a forward and a goal scorer. And we're going to take another stab at this guy who's 12 million and he's going to give us 4 goals and away we go. So if I had my choice, it would be Openda. If we were talking strictly on the basis of, hey, you can have one of the two, not necessarily factoring the price tag and how that's going to impact the summer, I would take Openda.
Okay. Tom?
Completely agree. If we're removing the price tag and you're just looking at the team needs, it's far easier to find centre midfielders than there is goal scorers. But I think what is also key for Milan is you have midfielders. Like, they might be injured or they might not be on it at the moment, but they will come back at some point. That goal scorer, or that consistent focal point, just isn't there, and it's not even like I adore Zlatan Ibrahimovic, but Father Time is undefeated, as the saying goes. The bloke's 41. He ain't going to be the same guy he's been for many, many years. Olivier Giroud, the perennial, is he underrated? He's so underrated that he's now overrated kind of guy.
Yeah.
They're not, if you want to be the top team, and I know Maldini said when you get to certain positions, you have to start spending. You can't rely on a 36-year-old and a 41-year-old. I think he's 36, but that's beside the point.
Yeah, he's 36.
You can't rely on them two and Divock Origi to be your goal scorers. Like, you have
not even a natural striker.
This is it.
And very limited players. Yep.
This is it. So Openda's the one. Openda's the one for me because you to find a good goal scorer like that for the price you're going to have, he's going to be available this summer, is too good to miss. Yeah.
And just one more question, because I just thought of it then. If you were to have to guess where Openda ends up, where does he go?
Ooh.
You can pick a league. You don't have to go specifically team, but do you think it's more likely that he heads to a Bundesliga or Premier League over a Milan?
No, I think I have Milan over the Bundesliga.
Okay.
And I think I might have Milan over the majority of Premier League teams, just because the teams that would buy him and that would represent a step up either already have a striker or wouldn't look in those areas. So I'm thinking like Aston Villa don't need a striker like him. Brighton don't need a striker like him. Tottenham, Christ knows what's going on with them strikers. The teams that would sign him already have strikers or have other problems they want to sort out. So I'd probably put Milan front of the list at the moment.
I think the one thing that could work in Milan's favor, much like what it did with CDK, is not just necessarily the will of the player, but I think to your point, talking about like some of those other teams that are maybe not the big giants. How much did we hear about last summer where Leeds were ready? They wanted CDK. They were adamant. They were kept pushing. He's like, I only want Milan, because he probably saw like Leeds, a fine club, a fine institution, but this is Milan. And I know it's not going well for him, but I think you might find something similar to Openda, where he's like, hey, I see Leao. I see a lot of these French players have really grown at AC Milan. I think that's a strong case and claim for Milan to be a better destination than some of the clubs that might come about in the Premier League. So I agree there.
Yeah. Hopefully they get this resolved. I think it's the number one need. There's only been one player since 2010 that has scored over 20 goals for Milan and Serie A, and that was Zlatan back in 2011, 2012. He had 28. They haven't had anyone really come close since. It's for one of the greatest clubs in the world. It's kind of embarrassing at this point. Tom, we appreciate you so much. Sorry we might have kept you on a little bit longer. I've had your Twitter at the bottom for most of this. You're still with TalkSport, doing all that sort of stuff. Anywhere else that people can check out your stuff regarding maybe even Spurs or some football in France as well?
It's all there. I'm not. I don't do podcasts or anything like that. I'm trying, but I haven't done one.
You should, because Tom is fantastic. We're going to have Tom's information in the description of the video. He's always a great guest. Check out some of the episodes we had with even Milan Reports and State of Play podcast. Tom is number one, also a big baseball fan as well. Ohtani and Trout hit home runs today. So just saying, the Angels are probably losing. Matt, really, really quick, plug in everything for yourself as well, and then I'll do mine. And then
Sure, yeah. Everything I'm working on, or will be working on, is on Twitter at Matt_Santangelo. Some at least one more week of Serie A fantasy content coming your way. Some season review, season wind-up stuff, or roundup stuff for Football Italia as well. So everything that's happening with me and my work is on Twitter at Matt_Santangelo.
Yep, and you can follow me at Martino Puccio. A wealth of different sports you could find on there. The Celtics absolutely crushing. Just want to say the ending to Ted Lasso, very, 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 very subpar. Succession was a 10 out of 10 show. If you haven't seen that show yet, I highly suggest it. Just wanted to toss in a pop culture thing there. Tom, thank you so much once again. Santangelo, probably talk to you tomorrow. Otherwise, guys, please like, subscribe, comment everything you thought about the video. See you later.